The wind screamed across the white mountains, carrying tiny shards of ice that bit into the skin like knives. Snow fell endlessly from the dark sky, hiding everything under a thick, cold blanket. Somewhere in that frozen wasteland, a human named Ethan Cole was trying to stay alive. He had crashed his transport shuttle an hour ago. The navigation system had failed, and now he was trapped in the middle of an alien planet called Virelia, known for its deadly blizzards. His body shook from the cold as he pulled his thermal coat tighter and looked around the endless snow. "Come on, there has to be some shelter," he muttered, breath forming white clouds. His ship was gone, buried under the snow. The only light came from the flickering beacon on his wrist. Then through the howling wind, Ethan heard something. A faint cry. At first he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him. But then he heard it again. A voice, weak, frightened. He turned toward the sound and started walking, each step sinking deep into the snow. The cold burned his lungs, but curiosity and worry pushed him forward. As he climbed a small ridge, his eyes caught movement below. Two small figures lay half buried under the snow near a broken capsule. He ran down the slope, heart racing. When he brushed away the snow, he froze in shock. They weren't human. Two alien girls, and maybe teenagers, with pale blue skin and glowing white eyes, stared at him weakly. Their silver hair was frozen, their lips trembling. They wore torn suits that didn't seem made for this planet. "Hey, don't move. I'll help you," Ethan shouted over the wind. One of them blinked slowly and whispered something in a language he didn't understand. The other tried to move, but her arm looked injured. He didn't know who they were or where they came from, but they were alive, barely, and that was enough reason to act. He pulled out his emergency heater, pressed it between them, and covered them with his coat. The girls flinched at first, maybe they didn't trust him. But as the warmth spread, one of them looked at him with wide eyes. Her voice was weak, trembling. "Human. You help?" Ethan nodded quickly. "Yes, I'm human. You're safe now." She closed her eyes and whispered something to her sister. They both started crying, silent tears that froze before they fell. Ethan realized how fragile they looked. Whatever species they weren't built for the cold. He checked his wrist beacon. The temperature was dropping fast, -50 degrees and falling. They wouldn't last long out here, neither would he. He lifted one girl onto his back and helped the other walk, step by painful step toward a rocky cave he had seen earlier. The storm howled louder, as if trying to stop him. Snow whipped his face, but he didn't stop. By the time they reached the cave, Ethan could barely feel his hands. He set them down gently and activated his portable heater. Warm light filled the small space. The girls curled up close to it, their shivering slowly easing. Ethan looked at them, their strange glowing eyes now dull with exhaustion. They were so different from him, yet at that moment they looked helpless. Like lost children. "Who are you?" he asked softly. The older one opened her eyes. "We are sisters. From Erelon." Her voice cracked. "Our ship crashed." Ethan frowned. "Erelon? That's outside the known colonies." The younger sister looked at him, eyes full of fear. "We ran away. They will find us." Before Ethan could ask who they were, a sharp sound echoed from outside the cave. Something metallic moving through the storm. Ethan's heart froze. The sisters looked terrified. "They found us," the older one whispered, voice trembling. Outside, a bright red light flickered through the snow, moving closer and closer. Ethan reached for his sidearm, eyes fixed on the cave entrance. "Stay behind me," he said. For a moment, everything went silent. Then a heavy thud shook the ground. The girls clung to each other. The wind screamed again, and a shadow appeared at the mouth of the cave. Tall, mechanical, glowing red. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Whatever had been hunting them had finally arrived. The red light outside the cave blinked like a warning. Snow blew in through the opening, swirling around Ethan and the alien sisters. The air grew heavy, filled with a low humming sound. Cold, mechanical, and close. Ethan pressed his back to the wall, eyes on the entrance. The two sisters crouched behind him, trembling. Their glowing eyes reflected the faint heater light, wide with fear. "What is that?" he whispered. The older sister swallowed hard. "Hunters. Machines sent to find us. Machines!" Ethan frowned. "Who sent them?" She shook her head weakly. "Erelon Empire. We escaped them. They do not forgive. Runaways. Ethan's grip on his sidearm tightened. He had no idea what kind of empire they were talking about, but the fear in her voice told him enough. The humming grew louder. Then out of the blizzard a tall metal shape appeared. Its body gleamed like frozen steel with glowing red sensors for eyes. It was easily 8 feet tall, walking with slow, heavy steps. Target found, it said in a flat robotic voice. Retrieve subjects alive. Eliminate the human. Ethan's stomach dropped. Oh, hell no. He aimed his sidearm and fired. Blue plasma shots hit the machine's chest but barely scratched it. The robot turned its head toward him, unfazed. Resistance detected, it said. The creature raised its arm, and from it, a pulse cannon charged with a whine. Move, Ethan yelled, diving sideways. The blast hit the cave wall, sending chunks of rock flying. The sisters screamed and ducked behind the heater. Ethan rolled over the cold floor and fired again, aiming for the joints this time. Sparks flew. One of the machine's legs jerked slightly. That was something. But it wasn't enough. The machine stepped forward, snow melting around its red-hot feet. It raised its weapon again. Then suddenly the older sister lifted her hand and the air shimmered. A wave of blue energy burst from her palm, slamming into the robot. The sound was like thunder inside the cave. The machine staggered backward, its sensors flickering. Ethan blinked in shock. What was that? The girl was breathing hard, her skin faintly glowing. Energy pulse. My last strength, she said weakly. I cannot do it again. The machine steadied itself, smoke rising from its shoulder. Unauthorized energy detected. Upgrading threat level. Oh, come on, Ethan muttered. You've got to be kidding me. He looked around desperately. His heater still running. His backpack half open. Inside it, a fusion battery. Dangerous, unstable, but powerful. He had an idea. Hey, he said to the girls. When I say run, you run, got it? The younger one shook her head frantically. You'll die. Maybe, he said with a faint grin. But not before it does. He pulled the fusion battery out, twisted the top open, and armed it. The display began to flash red. Overload in 10 seconds. He tossed the heater at the robot to distract it. The machine turned slightly, enough for Ethan to slide the battery under its feet. Now, he shouted. The sisters bolted out of the cave, clutching each other, stumbling through the snow. Ethan followed, but the machine noticed the blinking light at its feet. Warning. Unstable core detected. The explosion was deafening. A flash of white light tore through the cave, throwing snow and fire into the air. The ground shook. Ethan fell forward into the snow, ears ringing. When he looked back, the cave was gone, just a smoking crater. The sisters ran to him. The younger one cried, Ethan, are you hurt? He groaned, sitting up slowly. His coat was burned, but he was alive. I've had better days. They looked back at the crater, the flames reflecting in their glowing eyes. It will send more, the older sister whispered. We must keep moving, Ethan nodded. Then we move. He stood grabbing his half-broken scanner. The storm had started to calm, but the sky above now glowed faintly red like something orbiting far overhead. What's that? Ethan asked. The older sister looked up, her expression full of dread. Their ship. The hunter's mother drone. Ethan clenched his jaw. Then we can't stay out in the open. We'll need shelter, somewhere it can't see us. There is an old station, the younger sister said quickly. Far east. Abandoned human base. Ethan blinked in surprise. A human base here? Yes, she said. It was built long ago, before your people left this planet. He looked at them both. You know a lot about humans. They didn't answer. Their faces turned away. Something about that silence felt strange, like there was a secret they weren't ready to share. All right, Ethan said, finally pulling up his scarf. Then let's move before that thing in the sky finds us. The three of them began walking across the frozen field, leaving behind the smoking remains of the cave. Above them, the red glow followed, silent, patient, and watching. And deep in the shadows of the storm, another mechanical voice whispered through the wind. Target survived. Begin phase 2. The storm had quieted, but the silence that followed was even more dangerous. Ethan walked in front, his boots crunching in the frozen snow. The two alien sisters followed close behind, wrapped in his emergency blanket. Their silver hair shimmered faintly under the pale light of Viralia's twin moons. They had been walking for hours, heading east toward the old human base the sisters had mentioned. Ethan's body ached, but he didn't complain. The sisters were weaker, Their breaths came out in short, trembling gasps. Every few steps, the younger one stumbled. Ethan caught her each time. "Easy," he said softly. "You're freezing." She looked up at him with glowing white eyes and whispered, Why you help us, human?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because that's what humans do. We help people who need it." The girl tilted her head as if trying to understand those words. She had never heard kindness spoken so simply before. The older sister, quiet and watchful, kept glancing at the sky. The red light, the hunter's ship, still glowed faintly behind the clouds. She knew it hadn't given up. After a long silence, she said, "They will come again." "I figured," Ethan replied. "Then we find that base fast." Hours later, through the frozen mist, Ethan finally spotted it, the edge of a rusted tower rising from the snow. A cracked sign near it read, "Human Research Outpost, Delta 9. They hurried inside. The doors creaked open with a groan, revealing darkness and silence. The air was cold, but at least it was shelter. Inside were the remains of an old world, metal walls covered in frost, broken screens, and empty crates. The sisters looked around in awe. "You've been here before," Ethan guessed, watching the older one's face. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Long ago, when I was small. Humans came to Arelon. They studied us. Some were kind. Others not." Ethan frowned. "Wait, humans were on your world?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Before the Empire forbade contact. They said humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable." Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah, that sounds about right." But inside he felt uneasy. What did she mean by dangerous? And why would humans have been on Arelon in the first place? The sisters found a small room that still had working power. Ethan managed to start the old generator. The lights flickered on, dim but warm. They sat together by the heater, silent for a while. The younger sister, her name was Lyra, leaned against Ethan's arm. She was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. The older sister, Solara, sat across from them, staring at him thoughtfully. "You are not like the others," she said finally. "What others?" "Humans we met before. They took what they wanted. They never stayed to help." Ethan looked at her seriously. Maybe they forgot what it means to be human. Solara's eyes softened. "You risked your life for us twice, even when the hunters came." He shrugged. "I wasn't going to let you die out there." For a moment, the cold world around them seemed to fade. Only the hum of the heater and their quiet breathing filled the room. Then suddenly a soft beeping came from one of the old terminals on the wall. Ethan walked over, brushing the frost off the screen. It flickered to life, showing static. Then a faint image, a message. An old recording. He pressed play. A human scientist appeared on the screen, wearing a faded uniform with the Earth Alliance symbol. "This is Dr. Rowan of Outpost Delta 9, the recording said. "Project Seraph, Phase 3 complete. Hybrid subjects stable. DNA combination successful." Ethan froze. "Hybrid subjects?" The camera turned to show a small pod. Inside it, 2 glowing shapes. Small, blue-skinned infants. Ethan turned slowly toward the sisters. They were staring at the screen, trembling. "That's us," Lyra whispered, her voice breaking. Solara's eyes filled with tears. "They made us here." Ethan's heart pounded. The truth hit him like a storm. They weren't just alien runaways. He muttered. "You were made by humans." Solara nodded weakly. "We were born in a lab. Part human, part Arelon. When the Empire found out, they ordered us destroyed. We escaped, but they never stopped hunting us." Ethan sank down onto a broken chair, staring at the floor. The Empire wanted them dead for what they were, and humanity might not be innocent either. Outside, thunder rolled, but it wasn't from the weather. The red glow had returned. The hunters had found them again. Lyra grabbed Ethan's hand. "They are here." Ethan stood up, his jaw tight. "Then this time we make sure they don't take anyone." Solara looked at him, eyes full of both fear and faith. "You cannot fight them all, Ethan." He checked his weapon, then looked her straight in the eye. "Maybe not, but I'm not running anymore." Through the cracked window they could see the red lights descending, a whole squad of hunter drones. The storm began again, wind howling through the broken metal. Ethan took a deep breath. The fight for survival wasn't over. It was just beginning. Snow whipped across the broken windows of Outpost Delta 9. The storm had returned, roaring louder than before. But this time, The sound of the wind was joined by the hum of engines. Red lights moved across the sky like angry eyes. The hunters were back, and there were more of them now. Inside the base, Ethan checked the old control panels. Most of them were dead, but a few still had some power. The flickering lights above him painted his face in shadows. Solara and Lyra stood near the old generator, their glowing eyes wide with fear. The ground vibrated as the first hunter drone landed outside. "They're here," Lyra whispered. Ethan took a deep breath, gripping his sidearm. "Then we hold the line." He wasn't a soldier anymore, just a pilot who'd crashed on the wrong planet. But at that moment, none of it mattered. 2 innocent lives were behind him. He wasn't going to lose them. Solara moved beside him. "You cannot stop all of them," she said softly. Ethan glanced at her. "Maybe not, but I can slow them down." The door shook with a loud boom. Metal bent inward. The hunters were trying to break in. Ethan aimed his gun at the entrance. His heart pounded like a drum. Lyra pressed her palms together, her skin glowing faintly blue. "We can help," she said. "We still have power inside us." Ethan looked at her worriedly. "Last time you used that energy, it nearly killed you." She smiled weakly. "Then it's a good thing I'm not afraid to die anymore." Before he could argue, the door exploded inward. Fire and metal shards flew everywhere. 3 hunter machines stepped through the smoke, their red eyes scanning the room. "Targets located," one of them said. "Eliminate human. Retrieve hybrids." "Yeah?" Ethan muttered. "Come and try." He opened fire, plasma bolts lighting the room. The first shot hit a hunter in the neck, making it spark. Lyra raised her hands and a wave of blue energy burst from her body, slamming into the second one. It stumbled backward, smoke rising from its armor. The third raised its cannon. But before it could shoot, Solara shouted something in her own language. The lights in the ceiling flickered and a blast of electricity poured from the broken cables, striking the hunter dead on. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. For a moment there was silence. Then Ethan heard more. Footsteps. Heavy ones. The main door behind them opened again, and this time something larger stepped through. It wasn't a drone. It was a humanoid machine, tall and covered in armor that shimmered red. Its voice was deep, calm, and cruel. "Human Ethan Cole," it said. "You interfere with Erelon Imperial law." Ethan glared at it. "Law, you mean murder?" "Containment," the machine replied coldly. "Hybrids must not exist. Their code threatens both species," Solara shouted. "We are not weapons." The machine's red eyes turned toward her. "You are products of forbidden science. You are proof of humanity's arrogance and the Empire's shame." Ethan's anger boiled. "Then you'll have to kill me first." "So be it." The machine raised its arm. A blinding red beam shot forward. Ethan dove aside just in time, the blast slicing through a steel wall. He fired back, shot after shot, but the machine barely flinched. Its armor was too strong. "Ethan!" Solara screamed. "The reactor! Below the floor!" He looked down. A broken panel near the corner exposed a glowing blue core. The base's ancient power reactor. If it overloaded, the entire station would blow sky high. He understood instantly. "You want to turn this place into a bomb?" Solara nodded. "It's the only way." Lyra looked horrified. "But we'll die!" Ethan looked between them, the sisters, terrified but brave, and the machine that was stepping closer with every second. He made his choice. "Solara, get your sister out of here now." "No," Lyra cried. "We won't leave you." Ethan smiled sadly. "I'll catch up." He knelt beside the reactor and began pulling wires, rerouting the old circuits. The machine noticed. "Detonation detected," it said. "Abort." It charged toward him, but Solara raised her arms and screamed. Her body glowed so bright it filled the room with blue light. The walls shook. The machine froze, trapped in a field of energy. "Ethan!" she shouted. "Now!" He slammed the final switch. The reactor began to pulse wildly, energy building like a heartbeat. Lyra screamed, grabbing her sister. "Solara, stop!" "You'll burn out." But Solara only smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Protect him, little one." The machine roared, breaking free just as the core exploded. Light swallowed everything. Ethan felt himself thrown through the air. Then silence. When he opened his eyes, the world was white again. Snow was falling, slow and gentle. The base was gone, just smoke and melted metal. He turned his head. Lyra was beside him, alive but crying silently. Solara was gone. Only a faint blue glow remained in the snow where she had stood. Ethan's chest tightened. "She saved us," he whispered. Lyra nodded, tears freezing on her cheeks. "She said she would protect you." Ethan looked at the sky. The red glow was gone. The hunters had been destroyed. But something deep inside him told him this wasn't the end. Not yet. The wind was quiet again, almost peaceful after the explosion that had shaken the mountains. Ethan and Lyra stood alone on the frozen field, surrounded by smoke and falling snow. Outpost Delta 9 was gone. Only twisted metal and faint blue sparks remained. Reminders of Solara's sacrifice. Lyra knelt beside the melted ground, her hands trembling. The snow around her still glowed faintly where her sister had vanished. "She's gone," she whispered, voice small and broken. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "She saved us, Lyra. She made sure you'd live." Lyra looked up, tears shining in her glowing eyes. "She promised we would never be alone." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with grief. Then, beneath the wind, Ethan heard a soft humming sound. It wasn't the storm. It came from the ground. He frowned. "Do you hear that?" Lyra nodded. "It's calling." They brushed the snow aside, revealing a metal hatch half buried under the ice. The explosion had cracked it open. Strange blue light pulsed from within. Ethan helped pry it open, and a rush of warm air escaped. Strange on such a frozen world. A staircase led down into darkness. An underground level, Ethan said. Solara must have known. He turned to Lyra. "You don't have to come if—" But she was already stepping forward. "If she left something, I will find it." They descended slowly, the walls glowing faintly as they passed. It was like stepping into another world, quiet, humming with hidden energy. At the bottom, they found a large chamber filled with frozen machines. Most were dead, but one still glowed softly in the center, a containment pod. Inside it floated a crystal sphere shining with pale blue light. Lyra gasped. "That's her energy." Ethan stared at it. "You mean Solara?" "She transferred part of herself here," Lyra whispered. "A memory, or a promise." They approached slowly. As Ethan reached out, the sphere pulsed, and Solara's voice filled the room. "Lyra, if you are hearing this, it means I am gone, but our purpose is not. The Empire feared us because they saw what we could become. You must protect the human. He is the key. His DNA completes what we began." The message ended. The room fell silent again. Ethan stood frozen. "My DNA? What does that mean?" Lyra looked at him, fear and wonder mixing in her eyes. "You carry the same pattern as the scientists who made us. They used your kind's code to give us life. Maybe Solara believed you can finish what they started." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm just a pilot, Lyra, not a scientist." But deep inside, he felt something stir, a sense that Solara's sacrifice wasn't the end, only the beginning of something far greater. He turned back to the pod. If Solara's memory is inside this thing, maybe she left more than a message. They searched the chamber and found an old console connected to the pod. The screen flickered alive, showing symbols and diagrams, half human, half alien. Lyra traced her fingers across the glowing surface. "These are fusion designs. I'm combining human genes with Aerolon energy." Ethan frowned. "You mean, like what made you?" "Yes," she said softly, "but stronger, more stable." As she spoke, the crystal pulsed again. Energy flowed from it into the floor, spreading across the room like veins of light. The machines around them started to wake. Lyra," Ethan said nervously. "Did we just turn something on?" The ground rumbled. Panels opened around them, revealing metallic shapes. Drones, smaller than the hunters, but alive. Their blue eyes blinked open, not red like the Empire's machines. "They're different," Lyra said. They recognized Solara's code. The drones surrounded them, but didn't attack. Instead, they bowed their heads as if waiting for a command. Ethan took a step back. "Lyra, I think they're waiting for you." She looked at them, confused. "Me? You're her sister," he said. "Maybe you're their new leader." Lyra's eyes filled with tears again. "Solara didn't just die to save us. She died to awaken them." She looked up at the ceiling where faint cracks let in moonlight. "She wanted us to have a chance." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we make sure her sacrifice means something." He looked at the console. The screen showed coordinates, a distant signal blinking on the map. "What's that?" he asked. Lyra studied it. "A relay point, hidden beneath the northern ice. It's where the first hybrids were made." Ethan exhaled. "Then that's where we go next." He turned toward the stairs, but as they climbed, Lyra looked back once more. The drone stood silently, guarding the glowing crystal. She whispered, "Goodbye, sister. I'll finish what you started." When they reached the surface, the storm had finally stopped. The stars were bright and clear. The red glow of the hunter ship was gone. For now, Ethan looked at Lyra. "You ready?" She smiled faintly. "No, but I'll go anyway." They began walking north, their shadows stretching long across the snow. Far behind them, deep under the ice, Solara's crystal pulsed one last time, a heartbeat that promised she was still watching. For days, Ethan and Lyra traveled north through the frozen wasteland of Virelia. The storm had passed, but the cold was still merciless. Their breath fogged the air and every step felt heavier than the last, yet neither of them stopped. They followed the signal from Solara's message, a faint blue beacon leading them to something ancient, buried deep under the ice. At night, they camped beside frozen cliffs. The stars above were bright, silent witnesses to their journey. Ethan often caught Lyra staring at the sky, her glowing eyes reflecting starlight. "What are you thinking?" he asked one night. She hesitated before answering. On Erelon, the sky was never this free. We were always watched, always afraid, but here, even in this cold, it feels like I can breathe. Ethan smiled softly. "Then maybe that's what your sister wanted for you, to be free." Lyra nodded, though sadness lingered in her gaze. "Freedom means little when you're the last of your kind." Ethan looked at her gently. "You're not the last. Not as long as you're alive." She said nothing, but for the first time since her sister's death, she smiled. Just a little. 2 days later, the signal grew stronger. The ground began to change. The ice glowed faintly from below, like there was something alive trapped underneath. When they reached the end of a deep valley, Ethan saw a circular pattern carved into the frozen ground. It wasn't natural. "It's a structure," he said, "buried deep." Lyra pressed her hand against the ice and it began to shimmer under her touch. "This is it," she whispered. The first hybrid city. The ice cracked with a deep rumble. A hidden passage opened before them, leading downward into glowing blue light. Ethan stared half in awe, half in disbelief. "You're kidding," he muttered. "There's an entire city down there?" Lyra stepped forward, her silver hair moving with the faint energy in the air. "A city made by humans and Erelons together. Before everything went wrong, the tunnel led to a vast underground cavern. When Ethan reached the bottom, he stopped in awe. A massive city stretched out beneath the ice, towers of glass and metal, glowing veins of blue energy running through them. Bridges hung in the air and strange floating lights drifted like fireflies. "It's beautiful," Ethan whispered. Lyra looked around, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I can feel them. The ones who came before, the first hybrids, they built this place as their home." Ethan touched one of the glowing walls. It felt warm, almost alive. He saw symbols carved into the surface, human writing mixed with alien patterns. "This must have been hidden for centuries," he said. "Maybe even before the Empire destroyed it." Lyra nodded slowly. "They erased all records of us. But this city remembers." They walked deeper into the city until they found what looked like a central chamber. In the center stood a tall crystalline pillar pulsing with faint light. At its base lay hundreds of small pods, like cocoons covered in frost. Ethan brushed the ice off one and froze. Inside was a figure, blue-skinned, motionless, eyes closed. "They're people," he whispered. "Frozen. Hybrids," Lyra said quietly. "The first ones. They must have put themselves in stasis before the war." Ethan looked around at the countless pods. "You mean they're still alive?" "Maybe," she said, touching one gently. "If we restore power, they might wake." Ethan thought for a moment. "Then let's try." He walked to a control console nearby. It was old but still faintly active. The interface was in both human and Erelon code. Strange, but familiar enough for him to understand. When he activated the power relay, the entire chamber began to glow. The blue light in the walls flared brighter, running like rivers of fire through the city. Then slowly, one of the pods hissed open. A woman stepped out, her eyes glowing the same color as Lyra's. She looked around, dazed, then saw Lyra. Her lips trembled. Another alive? Lyra ran to her, smiling through tears. Yes, I thought I was alone. The woman touched her face gently. You carry Solara's light. Ethan stepped closer, stunned. You knew her? Yes, the woman said softly. Solara was one of us, the last protector of our kind. She stayed behind to hide our existence from the Empire. Ethan felt a chill, not from the cold, then this city. It's not abandoned, the woman nodded. We have slept for centuries waiting for someone to return. Waiting for hope. Lyra took Ethan's hand. We found you because of Solara. She wanted this. The woman turned toward him. And you, human, why do you help us? Ethan paused. Because your sister believed in me. And maybe, I want to believe in her too. The woman smiled faintly. Then you have become part of us. Before Ethan could answer, the ground suddenly shook. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber. Lyra looked around, alarmed. What's happening? The woman's face turned pale. They found us. The Empire's ship has locked onto the city's signal. Above them, the ice ceiling glowed red. The same color Ethan feared most. The hunters were coming again. But this time they weren't after 2 survivors. They were coming for an entire city about to awaken. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we fight. For Solara, for the hybrids, for everyone. And as the light from above turned the cavern crimson, the frozen city began to wake, one pod at a time. The red light above the ice grew brighter with every heartbeat. The Empire had found them. Ethan stood beside Lyra at the center of the awakened city. Around them, hundreds of pods had opened. The hybrids, blue-skinned, glowing-eyed beings, stepped out one by one, breathing their first air in centuries. Confusion and fear filled their faces, but behind both shone something else. Hope. The woman who had first awakened, Malin, looked toward the sky. The hunters are descending. The Empire will destroy everything if we stay here. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we make sure they don't. Lyra looked at him, her voice trembling but strong. There are too many, Ethan. We can't fight an army. He met her gaze. We don't need to fight an army. We just need to fight for each other. The attack moments later, the sky cracked open. Flaming drops fell like meteors as the Empire's dreadship descended. A massive black structure shaped like a blade. Hunter drones rained down from its belly, red eyes blazing through the storm. Positions, Ethan shouted. Malin raised her hands and blue light erupted across the city. Ancient defense towers powering on for the first time in centuries. Beams of pure energy shot upward, striking the falling drones. The battle began, explosions shook the ground. Ice shattered, fire roared, and the hidden city became a battlefield of light and shadow. Ethan ran across the bridge, firing at the advancing hunters. One nearly struck him, but Lyra appeared beside him, her hands glowing. She unleashed a burst of blue energy that blasted the machine apart. Nice shot, Ethan yelled. She smiled faintly. Solara taught me well, but the Empire's ship was too powerful. For every drone they destroyed, 2 more descended. Malin joined them, her face grim. The core generator is failing. If we don't stop the dreadship, this city will collapse under the ice. Ethan looked up at the giant machine hovering above them. Its center glowed with a massive crimson heart, the ship's reactor. I have an idea, he said. But it's suicide. Lyra grabbed his arm. No, you can't, he smiled. Hey, I never said I was good at staying alive. The plan. Ethan climbed into one of the old human aircraft buried in the hangar, a small, half-broken fighter jet from the first colonists. With Malin's help, he powered it using the hybrid energy cells. The engine screamed back to life, glowing blue instead of red. Ethan, Lyra said, standing at the edge of the hangar. Don't leave me. He looked at her, his voice soft. I'm not leaving. I'm coming back, just make sure there's something to come back to. Before she could reply, the jet lifted off. Snow and fire whirled beneath it as he shot into the sky. The Empire's dreadship loomed like a dark sun. Drones swarmed toward him, firing red bolts of energy. Ethan weaved through them, the old jet groaning under the strain. Inside the city below, Lyra and the hybrids fought on. Malin raised a shield of energy that covered the city dome, buying Ethan time. But she was fading fast. Go, human, she whispered. The future depends on you. The final flight, Ethan broke through the last swarm and aimed straight for the dreadship's reactor core. His targeting system was dead, his fuel nearly gone. The red glow filled his cockpit. He whispered, For Solara. For Lyra. A familiar voice suddenly echoed in his helmet. Soft, gentle, impossible. You're not alone, Ethan, it was Solara. Her memory crystal deep under the ice had connected to the ship's system, merging with the hybrid network. Blue light filled his cockpit. Energy wrapped around the jet, guiding it like a living being. Ethan smiled. Guess you kept your promise, Solara. The jet turned into a comet of blue fire and dove straight into the reactor. A blinding explosion ripped across the sky. Red turned to white. Then a silence. Aftermath: when the light faded, the dread ship was gone. Only falling fragments of metal rained down, melting the ice where they landed. The city below trembled but did not fall. The hybrid stood in stunned silence, watching the sky. Lyra fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Ethan! Malin placed a hand on her shoulder. He saved us all. But before despair could swallow her, a faint blue glow appeared in the sky. Something drifted down, a small sphere of light. Lyra caught it in her hands. It pulsed once, then a familiar voice whispered through it. Told you I'd come back. She smiled through her tears. You always keep your promises. The sphere floated upward again, breaking into thousands of tiny lights that spread across the city, merging with the crystals, giving life to every corner. The hybrids looked around in awe as warmth spread through the frozen air. A new dawn rose above the ice. Malin turned to Lyra. He gave us more than freedom. He gave us hope. Lyra looked at the rising sun, her voice steady. Then we build the world he dreamed of. A world where humans and hybrids stand together. The city's lights brightened, glowing like stars beneath the surface. And as the first rays of sunlight touched Virelia's frozen plains, a single phrase echoed through the wind, Solara's final words. Life always finds a way to begin again.